Good evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Welcome to Englebrook Independent News, Washington Crime Desk. Tonight, we bring you a special extended edition of our District of Columbia Federal Crime Report, highlighting major criminal cases announced in federal court and superior court during the final weeks of May of 2026. Tonight's report include murder conviction, firearm prosecutions, child exploitation cases, fraud scheme, robbery conviction, arson sentencing, national security investigation, and violent crime cases that continue to shape the criminal justice landscape of the nation's capital. We begin with a case involving national security and international sanction enforcement. Federal prosecutor announced that Yana Lanova, a 33-year-old Belarusian citizen, pled guilty to violating federal export control laws. According to the court documents, Lanova participated in a scheme that illegally acquired aviation equipment and aircraft components from American suppliers and routed those products into Russia. Authorities say false documentation concealed the true destination of the equipment, allowing restriction technology to bypass U.S. export controls established after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Investigators determined that the intermediary companies located in Armenia and elsewhere were used to move the equipment. Lenovo was extradited from France in November of 2025 and now awaits sentencing in August. Federal officials say sanction enforcement remains a major priority as authorities continue to investigate efforts to evade export restrictions. A district man has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for killing 27-year-old Danielle Stuckey. Authorities say the fatal confrontation occurred at the BP gas station on Alabama Avenue Southeast in October of 2021. Prosecutors told jurors that Taiwan Morris armed himself with a knife attached to brass knuckles after a verbal dispute appeared to have ended. Despite the victim attempted to walk away, Morris allegedly pushed her, knocked her down, kicked her, and fatally stabbed her. The attack occurred in front of the victim's 12-year-old child. Morris was convicted of second-degree murder while armed and sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. An 18-year-old district resident now faces 69 criminal charges connected to a January shooting that wounded 5 people near a metro bus stop. Anthony D. Sid Morales has been indicted on multiple violent felony charges, including assault with intent to kill while armed. According to investigators, the violence followed an altercation involving a juvenile victim aboard the city bus. Authorities say Delcin Morales exited the bus and opened fire into a crowd gathered near the 16th Street Northwest and Missouri Avenue Northwest. 5 individuals were wounded. The case remains active with detention hearings scheduled for July. Former Department of Justice contractor Javon King has been sentenced for a fraud scheme that cost taxpayers more than $1.3 million. Prosecutors say King manipulated procurement systems while working for the Department of Civil Rights Division, resulting in the purchase of more than 4,800 unnecessary government cell phones. The devices were sold throughout resellers. Authorities say King used the proceeds for gambling, vacation, private school tuition, and luxury purchases. King was sentenced to 12 months and 1 day in prison in order to pay full restitution. Federal prosecutors secured one of the most significant child exploitation sentences announced this year. Raymond Pathman of Toronto, Canada, was sentenced to 33 years in federal prison after targeting at least 145 children throughout the United States. Authorities say Pathman posed online as a teenage boy and manipulated children into producing sexual explicit material. Some victims were as young as 6 years old. The sentence will run consecutive to a 12-year Canadian prison sentence already imposed. Federal officials described the case as one of the most extensive sex duration investigations ever prosecuted in Washington. A Superior Court jury has convicted DeAndre Montgomery in the December of 2023 murder of Kenneth Barksdale. According to prosecutors, Barksdale stepped outside his family home after realizing he had forgotten his cell phone in his vehicle. At that moment, investigators say Montgomery and accomplices were attempting to break into the car. When Barksdale confronted them, prosecutors say that he was shot repeatedly. A jury convicted Montgomery on second-degree murder while armed, conspiracy, and related offenses. Sentencing is scheduled for August. Three district men have been convicted in a robbery and a murder of 21-year-old Rosando Miller. Federal prosecutors say Larry White, Mark Anthony Fletcher III, and Malik Kayvon Bonham targeted Miller after spotting his Rolex watch and designer clothes. Surveillance footage captured the robbery and fatal shooting. The defendants were convicted on all counts, including felony murder. Each now faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 30 years in prison. Federal prosecutors also announced several major firearm convictions. Michael Fenwick received 30 months in prison after fleeing police and being found carrying a loaded Beretta pistol. Kellen Volk Dukes was sentenced to 30 months after officers recovered a stolen Sag Saucer pistol during the foot pursuit. Gerald Ezel received 26 months after officers discovered two firearms, cocaine, narcotic packaging material, and a digital scale inside his vehicle. In each case, prosecutors emphasized that the defendants were previously convicted felons prohibited from possessing firearms. A particularly alarming case involving a machine gun device inside a Washington charter school. James Adrian Brewer was sentenced to 16 months in prison after bringing a converted Glock handgun onto school property. The weapon had been equipped with machine gun conversion device commonly known as a switch. The firearm was loaded and had been reported stolen. School administrators intervened before violence occurred. Federal officials continue warning that the increase of the use of machine gun conversion devices through the region. Dermako Jackson pled guilty to a series of armed robberies, vehicle theft, and jail assault. According to prosecutors, Jackson robbed multiple victims at gunpoint in March of 2025. Following his arrest, authorities say Jackson assaulted another inmate using a sharpened metal object while incarcerated. He remains in custody awaiting sentence. Federal prosecutors have indicted Michael Marks of Texas following a shooting incident near the Washington Monument. Authorities say Secret Service officers encountered Marks along the route of Vice President J.D. Vance's motorcade. Investigators allege Marks fled from officer before drawing a handgun and firing. A civilian bystander was wounded during the exchange of gunfire. Marks was struck by return fire and taken into custody. The federal case remains pending. Federal authorities also announced civil settlements involving two nonprofit organizations connected to improper Paycheck Protection Program loans. The settlement totaled more than $450,000. Prosecutors say both organizations received pandemic relief funds despite allegedly failing to meet eligibility requirements. Officials say recovery of improper obtained taxpayer fund remains ongoing priority. The U.S. Attorney Office also announces the conclusion of its investigation into the death of Brent Garcia while in police custody. Following a comprehensive review of evidence, body cam footage, medical reports, witness accounts, and toxicology findings, prosecutors determined that there was insufficient evidence to support criminal charges against Metropolitan Police officers. Authorities conclude Garcia died from fentanyl and alcohol overdose. No criminal charges will be filed. Alvin Pontinson pled guilty to federal robbery charges stemming from an armed robbery of Jersey Mike's restaurant in Northeast Washington. Authorities say Pontin first attempted to rob a nearby Chipotle before entering Jersey Mike's and displaying a handgun. Employees surrendered cash from the register before Pontin fled. Sentencing is scheduled for September. Finally, tonight, Ronnie Bockhart has been sentenced to 57 months in prison for setting fire to a residential apartment building in Southeast Washington. Investigators determined Bockhart intentionally ignited a fire near an apartment accompanied by family members. Although the blaze was contained, sprinkler activation caused extensive damage exceeding $200,000. Bockhart pled guilty to arson earlier this year. From international sanctioned violations and fraud schemes to violent crimes, firearm offenses, murder convictions, and crimes against children, federal and local prosecutions in the District of Columbia remain especially active throughout May of 2026. As these cases continue through sentencing, appeals, and further court proceedings, Englebrook Independent News will continue following developments from both federal court and superior court for the District of Columbia. For Englebrook Independent News, I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Stay safe, stay informed, and thank you for joining us on this special extended District of Columbia Federal Crime Report. Good night.